चाबी तो दिशा लो यहाँ का बहुत सारी।
हाँ
कोई चाबी तो नहीं रखी।
नहीं
हेलो।
Nikita,
Yes, sir.
so what do you think? Do you think that students may come still?
I'm not sure, sir. Some people come towards the end to ask questions if they have any,
Hmm.
but usually people who want to ask something, they join in the beginning.
Beginning, huh?
Yes, sir.
So I am doing one thing. I am temporarily logging out.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Maybe another 5 minutes.
Yes, sir.
I'll join again.
Yes, sir.
Or if you have any students join in, you just call me.
Yes, sir. I'll call you if anyone joins.
That will be better. You keep it, huh?
Yes, sir.
You keep logged in for 1 hour. You can do your own work. Okay. Don't waste your
Sir,
time.
no, sir. I'll explain the questions which I
Huh?
have to explain. I'll explain them the question and the background material from the question.
Hmm.
Someone has joined, sir, I think.
Hmm. Some name Rahul I can
Yes,
see.
sir.
Yes, Rahul, you can hear us. Rahul, we are not able to hear you.
Sir,
You can.
he is typing in the message box.
Hmm. No issue. You can write your question in the message box. Okay. So, what is your question? Okay. Parastatal bodies are. Your question is that what is the parastatal bodies? Okay. So, so parastatal has two name para and statal. So it comes from the word state. So at the state level, there are few organizations which is uh, created by the government, state government. Okay, and their main purpose is to deliver some certain activities. Okay, and those organizations, they work hand to hand with the state departments. For example, say state housing board, okay, or say state water supply authority, okay. So these are all parastatal organizations. They work for urban development or housing or this kind of services, and usually they are under some departments. So like the ministry at the central, state government has multiple departments. So under every department they have one or two or more parastatal organizations. Okay, so their job is very specific to some geographical area or some specific to some particular sector. For example, say road or water supply or power or housing. Okay, so that's the parastatal organization. But the question could be that why government create such parastatal organization, because sometimes running every projects and everything through a particular department or ministry could be difficult. Okay, whereas if we have a company or organizations who work from like a corporate, okay, like a corporate, or in a little more efficient manner than the government, in a focused manner. So that's the main purpose. So that's it. That is why this kind of parastatal organizations are formed. Nikita, you want to add anything? Hmm.
Yes, sir. Sir, I told them about parastatal bodies in reference to the urban planning function that are performed in cities. So many a times the city government, they can't tend to all the urban planning functions which are assigned to them. So in that case, many parastatal bodies, they take over some functions, and in like they work in coordination with the urban local government. But because many a times urban local government don't have capacity or expertise to handle some specific functions, so that is why parastatal bodies are there.
Hmm. Right. Rahul, please respond if it is clear or if you have any further questions or additions. And you can introduce yourself, Rahul, little bit from where you are. Sure. Okay. Nikita, you would like to respond to this question
Mm,
first?
yes, sir. Sir, I think this is from the public-private partnership. There are different types of models of public-private partnership in which I told them about a few which are mentioned in the URDPFI guidelines. So in
Hmm.
that there was one maintenance management and lease. So the key difference is that in maintenance management, all the it is assigned to a private player who handles the maintenance management of any service or infrastructure which it is handling. But any revenue which is generated from uh, giving out the service or from that infrastructure, it is for the public body only. The private body, it is given, it signs a contract and it is paid for handling the infrastructure or service by the private player. While
Hmm.
in the case of lease, it is given, the contract is such that the private player handles all of the operations, and even the revenue collected or from delivering that service or that infrastructure is taken by the private player only, not by the public player. That is
Hmm.
the key difference between
Hmm.
maintenance and lease.
Hmm. Maybe I add something. Yes, related to public-private partnership, whatever you have told, it's right. And but if you see these words in a general terms, lease, the meaning of lease is basically some kind of rights and obligations extended to some other organization. Suppose uh, any government is doing some activity and they want to delegate part of the responsibility to some private or some other organizations. Okay, so for that particularly physical infrastructure, for that reason they can delegate through lease. Okay, so lease gives them other organization the access or right, to do the development or to do the management or do the maintenance. Okay, otherwise, for example, say I am constructing a road, I am the state PWD department. Okay, but suppose you want to, you want an entrepreneur and you want to maintain the road for say first 10 years. So how do you do that? Okay, so I can give it to lease for 10 years with some certain terms and conditions, and you can do that. Okay, so that's why these words are different. And those are related to management is a in other, I mean, it's a broader work. Management includes the development of some infrastructure, leasing, maintenance, operation, everything, whereas maintenance and lease is a subset of management, kind of. So good to know that you are from Jaipur, MNIT Jaipur, and some of your faculty members are from IIT Roorkee. I know them. So you are in the first year or which year? Oh, fourth year you have written. Yes. Acha, acha, okay. So this course will help you, or how this course will help you? Okay, that's nice. So if you are keen to join in master's program, hmm, yes, this type of courses will give you much more outlook about the planning program. So you can prepare well of your, for the masters, and do consider IIT Roorkee for masters program also. So when is the examination, Rahul or Nikita? You have any idea?
Sir, I don't have any idea
I think
about
next week.
in next week. Sir, are there two examinations for this or just one?
Okay, Rahul, you have any other question or any? Okay, thank you. You can still keep logged in, no issue. You can stay if some other person join. Raghav, you can hear us?
Yes.
Okay, so please introduce yourself and then you can put up your question.
No, I just want to know who is taking the section. Yeah, I'm Raghav from NPTEL.
From
NPTEL.
NPTEL, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to know who is taking the session.
It is me. I'm taking the session, but sir has joined today for just today's session.
Okay.
You are from NPTEL Chennai?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, okay, okay. Nice to know that.
सर वो नया वाला लेटर हेड मैंने पूछा था मोदी से, तो बोले कि वो आया नहीं अभी तक।
क्यों है?
पता नहीं। सर तो आप वो फॉर्मेट भेज सकते हैं तो फिर
Nikita,
Yes, sir.
if somebody joins, you can continue. I'll join
Yes.
after 10 minutes. Huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Uh, so I think we can continue with the uh, problem solving session till then, as there are no other people here to ask any questions. So we'll just do the presentation and take on the questions for this week. So this week's live session is for assignment 7, week 7. You would have covered several lectures, lecture I think 31 to 35 in this week. This would have included the following topics. First is housing strategies, strategy for cities. In this, you would have covered what housing typology, what different types of housing are. Sorry. Then what is the process of deciding a housing strategy based on several elements like housing typology available, what is the finance available, what is the amount of land which is available, the condition of the people, the housing, existing housing condition and all of that. Then you would have studied a little bit about housing strategy for core city and new urban extensions. Then next you would have studied housing and urban poverty, in which you would have covered different types and dimensions of urban poverty, why it occurs, which are the most prevalent causes, and then related to that you would have studied informal housing typology, which caters to this section of the urban poor. Then you would have studied a little bit about the approach in which informal house planning is done and actions which are taken for informal housing as well as for pavement dwellers. Then you would have studied real estate regulation and development. So you would have covered why real estate development is needed, who are the players in real estate, what are the different legal provisions which are there for real estate development, and what is your role which comes into real estate development in any city. Then you would have studied urban land management. It would have covered land information system, what it is, how it is used, then supply management and demand management of urban land. Next, you would have studied urban risk and disaster management, in which you would have studied various terminologies related to risk and disaster. You would have studied the national disaster policy. You would have studied the cycle of any disaster management process, what are the different steps which come and how cyclically the process occurs. Then you would have studied the Disaster Management Act and role of different urban local bodies in managing the urban risks and the resources. Okay, so now let's start with the questions. I have clubbed the first and second question together because they more or less talk about the same concept, which is the classification of oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yes. Okay. So first question asks freehold land ownership gives the absolute right of the land to the owner. It's a true or false question. And second question is select the option which states the housing typology is based on origin. So first question asks about freehold land ownership. So it actually talks about classification of land based on the type of ownership. And the second question talks about housing which is associated to that land based on based on housing typologies based on origin. So first question talks about the classification based on ownership. Second question asks the classification. It pertains to the classification based on origin. So to understand that, we'll just look at the this classification chart for housing. So housing can be classified into several different categories based on what criteria of classification we are using. So if we use the criteria of land ownership, it can be divided into freehold, leasehold and rental housing. Freehold housing means both the land and the property associated to it is owned by the owner of the land and the property, and he has absolute right to use the property and the land associated with it according to what he wants. Obviously, according within the bylaws and land use and building use restrictions, but within the restrictions, it is up to the landowner to decide how he wants to use the land and up to what period. Then comes leasehold. So leasehold land is actually the land is usually owned by a public body, and the owner of that land can take the land. Sorry, not the owner. The person who is taking the land on lease, they can take the land on lease from the public body for a certain period of time, and they can instead of buying the land from the public body or anyone else, they take the land on lease for that certain amount, certain period, for a certain amount of payment, and after that the land goes back to the public body or whoever is the owner. So this you can see is one example of a leasehold land use right system. This belongs to China. China has a communist government, and all of the urban land in China is owned by the government. People who want to use the land for various purposes, they can take the land on lease from the government, and based on a system of land use types and building use types which they will be using it for, and the years of grant. So you can see land for residential purposes, they can be taken for 70 years. Land for industrial purposes, they can be taken on leasehold for 50 years. Land for educational, scientific and technological, so essentially all the social infrastructure, they can be taken for 50 years. Then for commercial, tourism or recreational purposes, land can be taken for 40 years leasehold, and then combined use land can be taken for 50 years. So after this period is over, most of the times the lease is renewable. So if the person having the lease, they want to renew their lease, they want to keep using the land for longer, they can renew their lease. If they do not renew their lease, the land goes back to the private body who owns the land. Then comes rental. So this can be the case for both the land or the housing associated with it. So it can be taken on rent from a private person, and usually this rent period is smaller as compared to the leasehold period, which is larger. This is smaller, and usually monthly or yearly payments are made to the person who is giving out their land or property or house uh, to someone seeking housing. Then comes based on origin and supply. So based on origin, housing can be either organic or planned type of housing, and planned or supply of the housing, which comes from a planned and constructed supply. It can be either formal or informal. So formal is something which is duly planned and duly thought out before the construction of houses and division of land parcels begin, whereas informal housing is not constructed for or divided by any planning authority. It comes out of an need or necessity by people who cannot afford to buy or have land which is pre-planned for by a public body or a public-private partnership, and is being sold to people who are in need of housing. Example of informal housing can be slums, squatters. You might have heard of terms bastis or jhugis or chawls. So all those terms pertain to informal housing. Okay, moving on to the next, which is structural quality. So this you might know, as these are very common terms. Based on structural quality, the housing can be classified as kacha housing, semi-pakka housing, and pakka housing. Kacha housing uses materials which are not very, they don't have a very long life. going back to okay. So kacha houses are constructed with materials which don't have a very long life, whereas pakka and semi pakka houses have some component like concrete or similar components which are used to construct houses which are more stable and have a longer life than kacha houses. Then coming to economic groups, so based on the economic status of the people who can afford to buy the housing can be divided into HIG, MIG, LIG, and EWS. HIG is high income group. Similarly, MIG is middle income group, lower income group, and EWS are economically weaker section. So always LIG and economically weaker sections are the two sections which usually struggle with affordability of housing in the housing market. So for them, special housing strategies and affordable housing programs are made to cater to their needs. HIG and MIG are usually economic groups which can afford housing in the housing market. Then comes build form typology. So based on the type of build form, housing can be divided into high-rise buildings, mid-rise buildings, low-rise buildings. So low-rise buildings usually don't have lifts or any services provided to them for movement to the upper floors. So it's usually single story, double story, or maximum up to 4 or 5 stories. Mid-rise buildings have go higher than that, and they have lifts, elevators, and other such services provided with them. Then comes high-rise buildings. These are very high buildings with usually more than 10-20 stories, and they have specialized services just to cater to all of the floors which are there in the building. Then based on functionality also, the housing can be classified into several types, like transit housing. So transit housing is a type of housing which is used for people who are in transit. They are either moving from one place to another, or their house at their place is being constructed, or it has some kind of disaster has struck and they cannot live there until the redevelopment of that area can be done. So they for that while live in a housing type which is called as transit housing. So it is named that because it serves the function of transit for those people. Then comes extreme weather, so housing which is built to handle or to resist certain climatic conditions, certain weather, especially built for handling extreme weather. That kind of housing is can be classified as extreme weather housing. Then comes old age houses or housing for senior citizens. So for people who are old, who cannot live by themselves, they need assistance in form of nursing and medical care. So they have specialized housing for them and they live there. So based on that functionality, the houses are referred to as old age houses. Then hostels you might know, people who uh, do not live in do not have a separate household. They live in one room or shared rooms and have mess and other facilities usually bunched up together, and it is sort of a temporary housing situation, not permanent housing. So those are referred to as hostels based, and that again is classified separately based on the functionality it serves. Then there are service apartments which are made for people who serve in a particular organization or any institution, and it's made specifically for for the members of that organization, and it caters to them. So I hope this clarifies that what are the different classification of housing and based on what type of criteria we use for the classification, how we can classify the housing. So I hope this will help you answer both these questions. Now we move on to the next one, which is the question asks, under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, NIDM has been assigned nodal responsibilities for research and training in field of disaster management. And NIDM stands for what? Okay. So, National Disaster Management Act of 25, it is the act which is basis of all current disaster management legislations and functions that are there in India at different levels of governance. So, when this act came, it created the provision of creation of disaster management authorities as 3 levels of governance. At the central level, NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority; at the state level, SDMA, State Disaster Management Authority; and at the district level, DDMA, District Disaster Management Authority. So all these organizations, all these authorities, they work in coordination with each other and provide disaster management response and functions at their level. Apart from that, National Disaster Response Fund (NDRF) was also set up towards which is set up to work towards disaster response activities in case a disaster strikes. So the authorities and NIDM, they work even before the disaster strikes, building, mitigation and other management, preparedness and management activities, while NDRF is a fund which is directed towards specifically towards disaster response activities. So apart from all these, there was another provision to set up a think tank body for research and development purposes for India's disaster management. So this body is referred to as NIDM. So I hope I have given you enough clues to actually guess what NIDM is. This is a link to NIDM's website where you can read more about them. So you can visit the website and read more about the organization and clarify any further doubts if you have about this question. I hope you can answer this question. Moving on to the next. The next question asks, what are the 2 main types of planning interventions for informal housing? And there are several options provided to you. Basically, there are 2 approaches for introduction of an intervention for informal housing. First is prevention and second is cure. So these are the 2 approaches towards the housing. Towards the informal housing intervention. So for prevention, what we can do is create affordable housing, because a lot of the time why informal housing occurs is because the people who are residing in those informal housing, they do not have the capacity to afford the housing which is available in the housing market. So by creating affordable housing for those population, we can prevent the phenomena of informal housing cropping up in our cities and towns. Next approach is cure. So this comes after we know that informal housing already exists. So to remedy that situation, there are several ways or several types of interventions which can be introduced. First is upgradation of basic upgradation. So this means upgradation of basic services which are there in the informal settlement. So like water supply services or waste collection or sanitation services. They might not have proper services and they might be living in hazardous situations because of that. So by upgrading the services for them, the informal housing situation can be rectified a little. Then comes improvement. So they might already have some services or some housing structure present. So by the means of improvement, we can improve, we can provide we can have provisions for improving the services which are there and the housing structure which are there in the settlement. Then comes redevelopment. So redevelopment is basically reconstruction of the housing or the site. So for this, we have to remove the informal housing which is present on the site and redevelop the area and or the housing and to provide suitable living conditions and services to the people on the same site, making sure that the project which is built for them is financially viable. So in such cases, a lot of the times when land or site on which the informal settlement is, it's taken from them. Some part of the land is used to develop housing for MIGs and HIGs. So they can be the ones who pay for the development of the area. So by collecting revenue from them. Sir, I was just explaining the questions to them, which were assigned in the previous run.
Okay, okay,
No one else has turned up yet.
okay, okay, okay.
Sir,
Yes.
Mhm.
Uh, so I was explaining to them about this question, the types of planning interventions for informal housing.
Mhm.
So first is prevention, in which we can create affordable housing to just avoid the phenomena of informal housing developing in urban settlements. And then there is the approach of cure, in which there is upgradation, redevelopment, improvement, and resettlement, which are the four types of interventions which can be introduced after informal housing situation occurs in urban areas. Uh, then the next question is about Real Estate Regulation and Development Act, RERA, which was the question is in which year the act was passed. So the answer for this, I think they have been taught in the lectures, and it should be very clear if they have gone through. So I'll just explain what RERA is, just to clarify if there is any ambiguity. So RERA is the Real Estate Regulation and Development Act. So it was introduced, and there are several provisions which were introduced as a part of this act. So the first was setting up of a regulatory authority, which would be set up at the state level, which would take care of all the regulatory procedures related to real estate development. Then a provision was introduced for registration of the project. So any real estate development project, any large real estate development project should be registered with the RERA, which is the regulatory authority, by the promoters of the project. Then there are duties of promoters which are assigned which are enumerated in the act. Then there are duties of allottees, or the people who are associated with the real estate development, who will be uh, taking the housing units or uh, any other real estate property from the promoters at the end of the project period. So their duties have also been enumerated in the provisions of the Act. Then setting up of an appellate tribunal. So this tribunal has been set up to carry out the sort of problem solving or any dispute redressal, basically, which occurs uh, for the development of the project. If any dispute occurs between the promoters and the allottees, the appellate tribunal has been set up to take up those disputes and settle them. Then there are provisions of penalties and offences. So if there are any uh, uh, if the promoters fail to deliver on what they have on what uh, they have promised as the part of development of the real estate property to the lottees, or they makes some errors. For that there are penalties and offences, and they have also been clearly enumerated by the act. And then there are provisions which detail out how the finance and the accounts should be handled for the development of the real estate project. So I think that gives enough clue of which act we are talking about, and it would be clear from that which year it was passed in. Next question is about the Land Information System, LIS.
Nikita,
Yes, sir.
I think you need little more time to complete this, so you can continue and complete
Yes, sir.
this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I am logging out. If
Yes,
there
sir.
is any other questions or anything, you just let me know.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So next question is about a land information system. So this is a true or false question. So the question asks, a land information system is a geographic information system for cadastral and land use mapping, typically used by local governments. So first we need to know what cadastral system are to answer this question. So cadastral is basically a method of registering land and designing which is designed to ensure that the rights of individual owners of the land and state of their property is taken care of. And then we need to see the other component of this question, which is LIS. So LIS is basically a flexible land surface modeling and data assimilation framework. The purpose of this is to provide modeling tools to integrate the satellite and on-ground observational data, so that land surface modeling can be done. So this modeling and data simulation technique can be used for a variety of functions. So one function from that is cadastral, like maintaining a record and displaying the information about the cadastral system. And it is often used by local governments to keep a record of that. I'll show you one example. This is the link to the website of Land Records Information System of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is their portal. You can see they have several uh, facilities in that. One facility of this is the map. So the map shows all the land parcels, their numbers, and where they are located. So you can see it is not complete map of the entire state, but there are some areas which have been digitized. And you can see all the land parcels, their numbers, they have been the area, which area they are located in, they have been digitized here, and it shows the different land parcels. Uh, uh, then we can also see their land records are also assimilated in this. So you can go and select any district and any tehsil from that, and any village, and search. So this is the document type Musavi, and then there is field book or khasra khasra pamash. So this all these documents, they have they maintain the records of different cadastral registration of the property which is there. You can see this is one map which is referred to as Musavi in their local system of cadastral mapping. So you can browse further at your own time and check out this land records information system. So this is one example of how the LIS and cadastral land use mapping and that can be integrated and can be used by the local government. So I think that gives you an idea of how this question can be solved if it's a true or a false statement. Moving on to the next one. Next question asks, consider the following methods of urban land management and select the option consisting participatory method of urban land management. And then you have several options. So let's see this chart for this question. So basically this question asks about various methods or various typologies of land supply management which can be done. So land supply management is required basically to create a supply of land for projects which need large pieces of land. So it can be a project which is done by a public player or a private player, or can be a project which is done in PPP mode. So there are several methods in which land can be consolidated or acquired for the project. First is acquisition. So this refers to land acquisition. So land acquisition is not usually, but all of the times it's done by a public body, and it is done by invoking the principle of eminent domain, which we know. So principle of eminent domain basically states that a public body can acquire the land from private owners with or without their consent if suitable, if the land is required for suitable public functions. So this can be done by the means of expropriation or large or bulk land acquisition. So for this also there are several acts: Land Acquisition Act, Land Acquisition Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act, which came in 2013, and then Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement. So all these acts came into force to take care of the provisions in the Land Acquisition Act, and so that the land acquisition process becomes more transparent and takes care of the rights of the people from whom the land is being taken. But as you know that it is a time-taking process, because you have to take care of the needs of all the people whose land is being acquired. So it's usually suitable for public projects which can be planned in advance, and it is usually done by a public body. Next is land use and development control. So we know there are several tools available to us, like incentive zoning, using the master plan, and using land use and development control plans. Also using transferable development rights. So using these, the type of use which a land can be used for, type of buildings which can be constructed, height of buildings which can be constructed, or several other things, they can be decided based on these tools, and the land supply can be managed with the help of these tools. Next is the assembly. So this land supply management tool is also known as town planning schemes in India. It basically follows two types of management techniques. But first is plot reconstruction. So the plot which are organically divided among several landowners, they can be reconstructed into plots, so that provision of amenities or other infrastructure like roads or other things can be provided to them correctly without moving their land parcel too much. Then is the land pooling or readjustment. So this again is a similar technique in which all of the land is pooled together, and people are compensated for their parcels of land while pooling the land to pooling and readjusting the land to create space for different infrastructures and amenities. Then there are partnership models. So this is the type of land supply management technique in which private players are introduced into the equation, and their expertise is used to develop the land. So these can be guided land development, in which the land development would be done by the private player, but it would be guided by the public body, or joint land development, in which the land development can be done in a partnership by the public and private player. So I hope that answers your question. For that answers. Okay. Another thing which this question asks is, which of these methods are participatory? So you can see acquisition is basically a process which invokes the eminent principle of eminent domain. So the participation of the user in the decision making process, whether the acquisition should be done or it should be not, is not that much. So it can't be essentially considered a participatory method. Same in the case of land use and development control. These development controls are usually decided by the urban planning authority or the urban local body or several other allied bodies, and not by the people who own the land. Although there are several times participatory methods and feedback techniques which are used to develop these master plans. However, still essentially these cannot be considered as techniques which directly undertake public participation into land supply management. However, in the case of assembly, land supply management is public participation comes into play very nicely, because in this case wishes and needs of each and every owner are taken care of, and they play a huge part in both the land pooling and the plot reconstruction method. Then partnership model. So this partnership occurs between the public and the private player, but not between the people who own the land. So this again, there can be some methods to invoke their partnership in decision making and get feedback from them, but essentially the case for land acquisition, land use development control, and partnership models, it is very subjective. If it depends on the area and the people associated with it, if it would be a participatory exercise or not. However, in the case of assembly, it is always a participatory exercise. I hope that helps you solve this question. Moving on. Okay, so this again is a table which I think you would have studied during your lectures also. This also gives you a little detail about what kind of acquisition type, participatory method, what is the time period, what is the transparency and satisfaction level in each case, and what is the manpower required for each case. Okay, coming to the last question, which is consider the following models for slum improvement and choose the option consisting of slum improvement model focused on slum upgradation and quality improvement. And you are given options: off-site, near-site, on-site, and far-side model. So basically, there are three types of models for slum improvement: off-site model, near-site model, and on-site model. So off-site model is replacing the existing slum which is there on the site and settling the people on a distant place, far away from the previous site. Near site model is replacing the existing slum in a nearby area, not very far away, but still not on the site where it previously existed. On-site model, however, is different from the other two, and it is replacing the existing slum in the same place. So you can see the first two, they are resettlement type of improvement programs, as they take the population from existing site and move them to another place, either to a faraway place which is off site, or a nearby surrounding place which is near site model. However, on-site model is a method in which you do not move the people, but you take on the project right there on their own site. So in this case, different technique of resettlement or improvement needs to be done. For this, what we use is improvement, upgradation, and redevelopment. And I hope it is clear to you what improvement, upgradation, and resettlement are. From this part, which is from interventions which can be used for informal housing. And then, as you know, slums are an example of informal housing. This was the last question for this session. I hope it is all clear to you. And as we don't have any more participants, I think we can end the session for today. And I'll see you in the next session, and we'll continue as usual in the next session with week 8's question. Thank you for attending. See you in the next one.